buenos días a todos y a todas. Tengo el gran honor de presentar y de recibir al rabino Lord Sacks en nuestro museo, en nuestro país, que ya lleva una semana aquí. Líder religioso mundial, filósofo, escritor y voz moral de nuestro tiempo. El rabino Lord Jonathan Sacks ha sido el rabino principal de Gran Bretaña y de la Commonwealth entre 1991 y 2013. Señoras y señores, tenemos esta mañana el gran privilegio de escuchar, de vibrar a este excepcional hombre que ha sido un gran promotor de la tolerancia, de la hermandad y de la sabiduría judía. Bienvenidos a todos.
Me? Yeah. Your Excellencies, the British Ambassador, the Ambassador of Israel, all those involved in this museum, this extraordinary museum, thank you for the privilege of seeing what you have created here. It is remarkable, and I bless you for it. Friends, do forgive me, but without a timer, rabbis can speak forever. I have spent a certain amount of time these past 4 years in the United States, and I have discovered that we are two nations divided by a common language, because certain words mean one thing in America and another thing in England. The word momentarily in American English means soon, but momentarily in English means briefly. People would introduce me by saying, Rabbi Sacks will speak momentarily. To which my reply was, rabbis never speak momentarily. But I thank you for this extraordinary museum of tolerance and of memory. I thank you for its message of tolerance to all humankind. I pay tribute to Mexico as a country that has learned to embrace diversity. And I salute Mexico for having one of the lowest levels of anti-Semitism anywhere in the world. The Jewish community feel blessed to be here, and Elaine and I feel blessed to be with you. Friends, can I move about? Yeah? Friends, it's the first, we have just seen the museum. And I just want to say about this specific museum that it is understood the three essential elements of a compassionate human order. Number one, memory is the guardian of our humanity. Philosophers in the past have relied on two different things, reason and emotion, compassion. But reason under extreme stress can be overwhelmed by emotion. And compassion can be something that we feel only for the ones like us and not for the ones not like us. So when reason and emotion fail, it is memory that protects our humanity. Secondly, you have understood that tolerance is more than indifference. It is the positive recognition that every human being, regardless of class, color, culture, or creed, is in the image and likeness of God Himself, and therefore life, every life, should have dignity, and every life is sacred. And thirdly, you have understood that, as the Bible puts it, Lo ta'amud al dam re'echa. Do not stand idly by when your brother is being killed, or as the English saying goes, no one who knows who said it, but it is credited to Edmund Burke. He didn't say it, but he probably would have said it. All it takes for evil to flourish is for good people to do nothing. I want to salute two remarkable women, Sharon Zaga and Mary Cohen. And I want to tell you a story. I once said, if a statue is ever erected in honor of human dignity and decency, it should be of two women, the two midwives at the beginning of the book of Exodus, Shifra and Puah, the first recorded incidents in history of civil disobedience, of refusing to commit a crime against humanity, itself only made part of international law in the United Nations Declaration of 1948. 3,300 years ago, two remarkable women understood what are human rights and what is human dignity. Today, in Sharon and Millie, we have two remarkable women in that same tradition of courage and humanity, and you have helped change a whole part of the world, the lives of the 3 million visitors who have been here, and I salute you both and bless you both. Amen. Friends, the message I have today is a difficult one. You see, memory is supposed to be about the past. Holocaust Memorial Day was created in Europe in 2000, the United Nations in 2005, because after the Shoah, the nations of the world, especially Europe, resolved never again. Never again would nations live by hate. Never again would they engage in genocide or attempted genocide. Never again would they consign a whole category of human beings to the category of subhumanity, Untermenschen. And of course, it was not Jews alone who were so deemed. It was the mentally and physically handicapped. It was the homosexuals. It was the Roma and the Sinti. Hatred can destroy anyone, but sadly, in this case, above all Jews. We remember so that never again. But I have to say, with a wounded heart and troubled mind, it is happening again. Today, the Middle East is awash with a tsunami of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism has returned to Europe, so much so that 11 years ago, I already warned the leaders of Europe, Angela Merkel, Jose Manuel Barroso, and Hans-Gert Pöttering, that Jews in Europe were now asking, is there a future for the Jews in Europe? And sadly, of course, as always, it never ends with Jews. And today the world is awash with hatred. Human rights are in danger. Religious freedom is in decline. All of this publicly recorded and accessible by the United Nations. The same lies, the same myths, and the same hate is still alive. I do not say for one moment that it is as bad as it was in 1933 when Hitler came to power. I do say, however, that it is as bad as 1895 when, after the Dreyfus trial, an assimilated Viennese Jew called Theodor Herzl stood in the streets of the most sophisticated capital in Europe, in Paris, and heard the words Mort aux Juifs, death to the Jews. 120 years after that event, that same call, death to the Jews, was heard in the streets of Paris by friends of Hezbollah, and I wondered, when does history change? Never again has become ever again. I have studied the Holocaust for many years. Elaine even said, "Can't you read any other books that are not about anti-Semitism?" I have read thousands of books. We have seen hundreds of films. I have visited dozens of Holocaust museums, and I still do not understand how it happened. Because it did not happen in a third world country. It happened at the heart of Europe, in the country of Bach and Beethoven, Goethe and Schiller, Kant and Hegel. It did not happen in the Middle Ages. It happened in Enlightenment Europe that had vowed that it left behind all the hatreds of the Middle Ages. And it was not a movement of the mass or of the mob. It was supported by lawyers, doctors, and academics. By the Nuremberg laws of 1935, overnight, all Jews were removed from hospitals, from universities, from law offices, and from courts. Overnight. And no one protested. Not the lawyers, not the judges, not the doctors, and not the academics. And tragically, not even the churches. The churches did protest. They protested one thing, the euthanasia program in 1939. And because of that protest, that program was stopped in 1940. So it was not that protest was not effective. The one time it was uttered, it was effective. But no one protested the murder of 6 million Jews. In the summer of 1938, knowing that a massive crime against humanity was about to take place, 32 nations met in the French spa town of Evian and debated and considered the problem, and all 32 countries closed their doors. Hitler made no secret of his determination to destroy the Jews. He used in public, the word he used, and I don't speak German, was Vernichtung, which means extermination. It means something unambiguous. That word was said in front of tens of thousands and broadcast to millions, and no one protested. In March 1938, when 97% of Austrians voted in favor of the Anschluss, within 1 month, 500 Viennese Jews had committed suicide because they knew what was going to happen. No one was in ignorance of it. No one protested, and that is what I still do not understand. Everyone knew, and no one protested. When I first stood at Auschwitz-Birkenau in 1995, the question in my mind was not, where was God? I know where God was, at Auschwitz. In the words, Lo tirtzach, you shall not murder. In the words, V'ger lo tonu, do not oppress a stranger. In the words said to Cain, the first human child who murdered his brother, Kol damei achicha tzoakim li min ha'adama, the sound of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground. That is where God was at Auschwitz. What I was worried about, and I still do not have an answer, is where was man? Where was humanity at Auschwitz? Where was this European civilization that prided itself as the most enlightened and rationalized and civilized of all time? Where was humanity? And the trouble is, it is happening again and again. Almost no one is protesting. And here I have to ask you to bear with me for just a moment as I try to explain what anti-Semitism is. You see, anti-Semitism is not a belief or it's a doctrine. Anti-Semitism is a series of contradictions. Jews were hated because they were rich and because they were poor, because they were capitalists and because they were communists, because they kept to themselves and because they infiltrated everywhere. Voltaire called Jews an ignorant people with a superstitious faith. Stalin called the Jews rootless cosmopolitans who believed nothing. How then shall I understand this phenomenon of anti-Semitism? And the answer is anti-Semitism is a virus. Just as a virus infects a human body, so the virus of anti-Semitism can infect the body politic. We have a defense of incredible sophistication against viruses called the immune system. How then do viruses survive and penetrate the immune system? By mutating. And that is what happens to anti-Semitism. It mutates. In the Middle Ages, Jews were hated because of their religion. It was religious Judeophobia. In the 19th century, you could not be enlightened and hate somebody because of their religion. So Jews began to be hated for their race. And this was not some idle, superficial thing. It was supported in German universities by two so-called scientific disciplines: the scientific study of race, a curious hybrid of biology and anthropology, and something called social Darwinism, that said that what happens in the natural world happens in the social world. The strong survive by eliminating the weak. Today, you cannot hate somebody because of their race. So today, anti-Semitism has mutated again. And today, Jews are hated not for their religion or their race, but for their nation state, the state of Israel. Let me make it absolutely clear. I do not confuse, and I know no Jew who confuses criticism of the state of Israel with anti-Semitism. On the contrary, I was asked this question by a group of school children in England. I said, how many of you think it's okay to criticize the government of England? Everyone put up their hand. I said, how many people think England has no right to exist? No one put up their hand. If a class of school children can understand the difference, so can every human being. The truth is that everything that was said in Nazi Germany about the Jews is today being said about the Jewish state. The same lies, the same myths, the blood libel. The Defense Secretary of Syria, Mustafa Tlass, in 1983, published a book which became a huge bestseller for years called The Matzah of Zion. Israelis kill Palestinian children to make matzah for Pesach. And the book that is regarded as a sacred text of the Jews, the fabrication called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, has been spread throughout the Middle East. And in 2002 and 2003, the Egyptian television and the Syrian television did 40-part dramatizations of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion to run through Ramadan. The same lies are being told. The same hate is being communicated, and the same principle is at work. The belief in Germany that if only there were no Jews, all our troubles would disappear. Today, throughout the Middle East, if only there were no Jewish state, all our troubles would disappear. Friends, our heart goes out to all the peoples of the Middle East. And in the Middle East today is a disaster zone for human rights and human life. 750,000 people killed in Syria. 5 million Syrians turned into refugees. Iraq and Afghanistan, in many places, reduced to ruins. Regular attacks on Christians in Egypt, and democracy and freedom and human rights in retreat throughout the Middle East and parts of Africa and Asia. And of those crimes against humanity, who do the students in Europe and America protest against? Not Syria, not Iran, not Al-Qaeda, not ISIS, not Hamas, not Hezbollah, and not Iran. They only protest against Israel. Now, we may be biased if we're Jewish, because Israel means something to us. But it should mean something to everyone, because it remains the only viable democracy in the Middle East, the only place where there's a free press, an independent judiciary, where adherents of all religions can worship in freedom, and where you can criticize the government in public and still be free the morning after. Friends, this is a bad situation. I did not understand the Holocaust in Europe, and I do not understand what is happening in the Middle East and in Europe today. I want to understand how such a thing can happen. It is hugely complex, and as I say, thousands of books have been written about it, but I want to be very simple. When bad things happen to any of us, there are one of two questions we can ask. We can ask, what did I do wrong? Or who did this to me? And there will be a world of difference depending on which question we ask. If we ask, what did I do wrong? Then we have begun the process of self-examination, of self-improvement. We are beginning to build a better future. But if I ask, who did this to me? I have defined myself as a victim. I have defined the other as a perpetrator. And therefore, I am not responsible for any evil I commit because I'm only a victim. And all the responsibility lies with someone else. And therefore, I can never build a better future because anyone who defines himself as a victim has defined himself as powerless. And I simply make my situation worse and worse and worse. And what can happen to individuals happens to entire cultures. Things went wrong in Germany in the 1920s and the 1930s. They lost the First World War. They suffered the penal verdict of the Treaty of Versailles. The economy was in ruins. There was hyperinflation. And instead of asking, what did we do wrong? They asked, who did this to us? And the answer was the Jews. It was a crazy answer. It was mad. Why then did Germans believe it? Including, incidentally, the greatest German philosopher of the 20th century, Martin Heidegger. Why did they believe this? Because if you believe you are a victim, you are able not to face the truth about yourself. Today, the Middle East is where Germany was in 1920. The secular revolutions in Turkey and the Arab nationalisms of the 1920s and 30s failed. The Arab Spring of 2011 failed. These are countries with inequality, poverty, unemployment, countries where human rights are abused daily. And instead of asking, what did we do wrong? Those countries are asking, who did this to us? And the answer they're coming up with is the Jewish state. That too is a crazy answer. Israel had nothing to do with the troubles of Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Somalia. But you believe it because it allows you not to face the truth about yourself. In the end, what is anti-Semitism? In a few weeks' time, we will celebrate the festival of Purim, the first recorded warrant for genocide in history, where Haman says to Ahasuerus, Xerxes, let the king issue a decree, la shmid la rogo la bedet kol haYehudim minavad zaken tafanashim b'yom echad, to kill every single Jew, young and old, women and children. And the question is why? And the book of Esther tells us the answer. Haman says to the king, Yeshno am echad, mufuzah, mufurad ben amim, there is a certain people scattered through your people whose laws are different from anyone else. Jews were hated because they were different. They were the most conspicuous non-Christian minority in a Christian Europe for 1,000 years. Today they are the most conspicuous non-Muslim presence in a Muslim Middle East. We fear the people not like us. Anti-Semitism is dislike of the unlike. But we are all different. Even genetically identical twins only share 50% of their attributes. And that difference is at the core of our humanity. Because no one is exactly the same as anyone else, no one can be substituted for by anyone else. That means because we are unique, we are irreplaceable. Therefore, our life is sacred. Or as the rabbi said, every life is like a universe. So a country that has no space for difference has no space for humanity. The hate begins with Jews, never ends with Jews. It wasn't Jews alone who suffered under Hitler. It wasn't Jews alone who suffered under Stalin. And it will not be Jews alone who will suffer under whatever new tyranny is about to enter the human arena. And that is why anti-Semitism is a danger to all of us, Jew and non-Jew alike. And I salute this museum for giving prominence, not just to the Jewish victims of the Holocaust, but all the victims of the Holocaust, and not just to the Holocaust itself, but to the genocides or near genocides in Bosnia, in Kosovo, in Rwanda, in Cambodia, in Guatemala, and in Darfur. Friends, the truth is that the most important words for me were spoken by Moses at the end of his life. He says at the end of his life to the new generation that is about to enter the promised land, don't hate an Egyptian because you were a stranger in his land. It is a very odd sentence. The Egyptians enslaved and persecuted our people and decreed death on every male Jewish child. Why is Moses saying, don't hate an Egyptian? Because if the people had continued to hate the Egyptians, then Moses would have taken the Israelites out of Egypt, but he would not have taken Egypt out of the Israelites. They would still be slaves, not in body, but in mind, slaves to the past. And Moses was telling the Israelites, if you want to be free, you have to let go of hate. I want to say that one more time. If you want to be free, you have to let go of hate. In a world today that is awash with a tsunami of hate, we have to remember that sentence. We have to remember what hate can do. It destroys lives. It destroys hope. It destroys trust. It destroys our common humanity. And it destroys not only the victim, but the perpetrator. Hate may kill those who are hated, but it certainly kills those who hate. And therefore we have to remember that God has given us many nations, many civilizations, many races, and many religions, but only one world in which to learn to live together. Friends, let us remember, for the sake of the future, and let us do so in the name of God, in the name of humanity, and for the sake of our children's future. Let us fight hate. Let us defeat hate now, before it's too late. Thank you. Pardon? Yeah. Word together? Yeah. Thanks. Thank you. Where are we going? Oops. Sorry.